Hello everyone, how are you doing today? Hope you all had a good 2 weeks since our last teaching intensive. So this is Faith Intensive number 13. And I want to, just before we start, go over a few administrative things and then we'll get right into the teaching. First of all, let me give you some ways to connect with us. You can connect with us on Facebook, and that is Based on Faith. Instagram is official_based on faith. The general email that you can use is info@basedonfaith.org, and our website is www.basedonfaith.org. And I encourage you to go to our website because there's a lot of good materials there. There's a lot of good articles in our blog section. And our store is up and running, so you can go and check that out as well. So I'm going to just get right into today's teaching. We're going to pick up where we left off in the last one. And that was Faith Intensive number 12. And we've also called that, the previous one, Love Intensive number 1. And then, so this one will also duplicate as Love Intensive number 2, just because we're focusing on love as well as it relates to faith. So when we started our last lesson, we talked about ways of communicating love. We talked about how in Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, he gave certain ways of communicating that he called love languages. And, generally people have a primary love language. This is what he says, and a secondary love language. And what the way that I really incorporated that into the teaching is that when we are communicating with God and we are hearing from Him and then communicating back in terms of love language, we don't always understand how God is communicating in terms of His love language, and so we need to learn His love language. And we looked at Hebrews 1:2, and we went through that verse and discovered that the language of God, or the love language of God, and His language, really, for that matter, is that He speaks in Son. So He speaks to us in Jesus, and so that is His love language. And so we need to understand Jesus so that we can understand how He speaks to us and how He loves us. So understanding the language of Jesus is going to be really critical to understanding God's love language to us. We also went through some foundational verses about the power of our words and speaking with our mouths. You can go back and listen to those. Also a verse about transforming and renewing our minds. And of course, one of the key verses from the last lesson was John 3:16. So I'm just going to read that again. And this is from the King James Version, which most people, as a child, you probably learned it in this version. It's, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, Jesus. Again, there's the love language. He gave Jesus, that whosoever should believe in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And so what we did was we went through this verse and we looked at, so for God so loved what? The world. So He loved, and the object of His love was the world, and it is the world. And that's why He gave Jesus. So we went through some examples that I printed out from my email and just social media, glancing for about 10 minutes. And so, for example, we looked at these, and these are just just what you see all the time, the world's way of speaking, the world's way of communicating. But this one was an email from Kate Spade, and it said options. Love those, right? So love, the object of love here is options, and those, referring to, purchasing their products. And so I'm just going to go over just a couple of these. So this one was from a Facebook group. Someone had received their January box. It's a shipment of surprises. And it says, my January box. Love, love, love it. So we see that love 3 times there is referring to the January box or the products in the box. So what we did was we looked back at John 3:16, and we discovered that if we actually insert these worldly ways or these common ways of using the word love, that it definitely is not correct in terms of how John 3:16 describes love. So, for example, in these advertisements, or just in these examples that I gave, some of the objects of love were purchasing purses, wallets, ice cream, things like that. And so, is love used correctly there? So we went back to John 3:16 and said, does this line up with the object of love in that verse? And so the answer was no in an overwhelming majority of the cases and the examples. So, for example, for God so loved ice cream that he gave Jesus for us. And so, obviously, looking at it that way, we see just how silly and ridiculous that the use of the word love is there. And then finally, in that lesson, we ended with looking at 1 John 4:8 and discovering the noun definition of love. And that verse says, for God is love. So God is love. God equals love. He is love. He's the absolute form of love. And anything that is love comes from him, right? So if we don't love, which is the first part of that verse, he that loveth not knoweth not God. So how can you love if you don't know the source of love, is what that's saying. He is the originator of love because he is the thing itself. And so loving is an enduring attribute of his nature. So we love as he loves. And so that brings us really to today. So we speak of love, and sometimes I think we really think love is very complex. And so again, we speak of loving ice cream, and we speak of loving cookies, and then we speak of loving God, or loving, our spouse, or our children, or our friends, or family. But are we prepared for love to fade over time? So what I want to point out here is that if I use love to say I love ice cream, or I love pizza, or I love that cute dress, right? My taste can change over time, right? And I've noticed that my tastes have changed over time. Here's an easy example. When I was younger, I did not like sweet potatoes, okay? I thought they were really not very good at all. And so it was interesting because I would say probably 10 years ago or so, I started to like sweet potatoes. And now I really, really like them. So my tastes have changed over time. So if I say, I love sweet potatoes, my tastes have changed. And in the biblical definition of love, which is really the definition of love, that use of love for sweet potatoes being the object of love, so now it is something in that example I love versus way back something I did not love. It doesn't make sense because one of the attributes of love is that it's never ending and it's eternal and it never changes and it never increases and it never decreases. So love does not change and it doesn't fade over time and it doesn't increase over time either. God's love for us is constant. We don't earn it and we can't work for it. And so are we prepared for love to fade over time? If so, that's not love. That's something else that we're calling love, but it's not love. And so that confuses our minds when we're trying to understand God is love and his love for us. So we feel insecure in love because we're prepared for love to fade or change over time. And so human love is often based on the perceived value of the thing or the person that is loved, right? Here's an example. I love my children, right? But, or in the world, let's say this is a way to think of how love could be based on the perceived value of the thing or the object of love. So versus a serial killer, right? Can I love that person? Their value to me is less, right? I mean, this is how the world thinks. God loves my children and he loves that serial killer, right? So it's not based on the perceived value of the thing or the person that is loved. And we know that people and things change over time, right? We are subject to falling short, right? And so this human love will move on to the newest thing or the newest person that seems to be of more value. You see a lot of times, I hate to use this example, but, somebody growing tired of their spouse and finding somebody that's younger and, in the world's eyes more beautiful, right? So it's the newest thing or the newest person that seems to be of more value. So in the world's eyes, youth and external standards of beauty are of more value, right? So that's not love, though, if it's based on those things. So love never changes. It doesn't change. I never stop. If I'm using the biblical definition of love correctly, then I don't stop loving because somebody grows old or because visually they're not as youthful or something like that. So this is the reason, you see a lot of divorces. I mean, it is what it is, right? I wish I could use a different example, but human love is driven to satisfy its own desires, right? It's its own desires that it wants to satisfy, which is a selfish desire. But we see when we look at John 3:16, God's love was based on his desire to give, not on his desire to receive. So God's love is not based on the attractiveness of the person or the thing, but it arises in the heart of the lover, God. See, love gives. It doesn't just want to receive, regardless of the condition of the one who's loved. So we know that because God loved us while we're still sinners, right? He loves us before we come to him. And so in the world's eyes, if I were to look at that, I would say that sinner is less valuable than the one who is saved, right? But God loves people. He loves the world, and he gave Jesus for the world, and that is the object of his love. So it's not what they can do for the one who's loving, right? So there's nothing that I can do to earn God's love for me. There's nothing I can do except just receive his love, right? It is unconditional. So his love is unconditional. That means we use that word a lot, but what does that mean? It's not based on a condition. If this, then I will love you. Or if this, then I will love you more. Or if this, then I will love you less, right? It's without condition. So it's unconditional. It's based on the heart of the lover, on the one who is loving. So it's based in the heart of God himself, who is absolute love, right? It knows no limitations or boundaries. And so we saw in that verse from the last time, God is love. So that's who love is. God is love. He so loved us that he sent Jesus to die, to set us free from everything that's under the curse. Sin, death, poverty, sickness, lack, everything that's under the curse. So is it possible for God's love to fade over time? Are you valuable enough in his eyes to keep his love from drifting to someone more deserving? No, absolutely not. And so this is a core issue that I think so many people have in terms of feeling worthy, because it's not based on you being worthy. Worthy is a condition, right? Worthy is a condition to say, if I'm worthy. If means like there's a condition I'm about to state. So if I am worthy, or if I am worthy enough, he can love me or love me more, right? No. And so one important passage of scripture that gives us some insight into love is 1 Corinthians 13. So I'm going to read a few verses of that. And as I do this, just think about how love is absolute, how it's based in the heart of God, who is the lover, and how that it is unconditional. It is not based on any condition at all. Okay, so here is verses 4 through 8. God's love springs from his heart and is infinite and unwavering. This love does not fade with time. This love suffers long and is kind, so it's patient. This love suffers long and is kind. That's the first attribute, patience, right? Love is patient. Love is kind. So this is a different translation than you've heard. So I want to say it this way because I want you to pay attention and not just say, oh, I've heard that before. Love does not envy, does not parade itself. So it's not boastful. It is not puffed up. It does not behave rudely, does not seek its own. So it's not selfish. It is not provoked. It thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. This love never fails. So, love that we're talking about, love, real love, absolute love, doesn't diminish, and it doesn't fade over time. You can't do something to cause God to love you less. You can't do anything to earn it or be loved anymore. And this love never fails. Never is one of those absolute words. It means never. It cannot happen, right? It never fails. So love is absolute. It cannot fail. I think that right there, love never fails. If we could just meditate on that and get the revelation from this alone, this love never fails, ever. Not once, not even for this split second. Never in the history of the world, and never for eternity will love fail. So when we measure love in terms of value, it will always come short. And so, we're aware of our faults and our failures. And so we think if, God only loves the lovely, right? He loves the lovely, then we're all at risk, right? We're all at risk. But we just read here, love never fails. This love never fails. And that's the difference between human love and divine love. And so what I want to interject here is then to say, human love then is we need to shift from thinking in terms of human love to thinking in divine love. And so renewing our minds and transforming our minds in terms of divine love, right? Getting out of the mindset of human love. So God's love is not based upon our value or performance, but upon His integrity and His decision to lay down His life for us, right? So that same divine love, it lives in us and it's available for us to give to others. And so I'll just end with this. Don't base your love on yourself or others on the value that you perceive, but rather on the infinite value to God, right? Because love never fails and love will never fade over time, right? So I just want to end with that. So what is love? Love is God Himself, and love never fails. So I hope that you are encouraged, and I hope that you are blessed by this teaching. Really, even as I'm going through it, it's really stirring up, love in me, and just renewing and transforming my mind as well to divine love. And we all need that. So again, hope this was a blessing to you. Let me just end again, just administratively letting you know that you can connect with us, and we really like it when you do that. It lets us know that what we're doing is encouraging and is a blessing. It keeps us going and encouraging us to keep doing this. So again, Facebook is Based on Faith. Instagram is official_based on faith. And our general email is info@basedonfaith.org. And of course, our website is basedonfaith.org. All right, so again, hope this was a blessing, and I look forward to our next teaching, which will be 2 weeks from now. So until then, I send you all love and blessings. Bye-bye.